those proteins. There's always a lot of questions you can ask about biology.
Well, yeah, and it actually simulates a fever, so that if you actually have an infection, like an upper respiratory infection or even COVID, that it would help your body destroy that virus.
Actually, that's a good point, because the virus is susceptible to heat, and that's the critical time, just a little bit beyond your normal human fever, regular temperature, is when the virus starts to fall apart. So that's true for the SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most important health practices people can engage in, because it'll actually help your body in so many ways. But it's obviously a bit costly. Typically, saunas are a few $1,000s or maybe even more. But if you have one in your house, I wouldn't use a commercial sauna like in a gym or something, because when you're sweating, you're detoxing and eliminating a lot of toxins that are fat soluble. So unless they were really assiduous at cleaning it regularly, which hardly.
That's a good point. It might be a problem.
Toxins in there, so and it'll also, but it does help your body detoxify. If you're, especially if you're heavy, you're going to store these fat soluble toxins, then your body excretes them.
It makes sense, actually, just the sweating, right? Alone makes sense. It's
powerful. And in Finland, where they did the studies, they found an overall 40% decrease in overall mortality. 40%.
Wow, that's amazing.
Heart disease. So it's crazy not to take advantage of this.
Right.
Once you have it, it's basically free. You just have to do a little. You have to shower and clean up afterwards, of course. But to sweat, when I go in there, I sweat in about a quart of water a day.
Wow, that's amazing.
At least a quart. I lose 2 or 3 pounds.
Wow.
So it's good though, and you feel so good when you get out of it, and especially jump in the water. So, but anyway, those were the pearls to give you hope of what you can do and should be doing anyway. Because even if it doesn't do anything against this, which we don't think we know it's going to activate the autophagy. So it'll help you not only if you had the vaccine, but even if you didn't, because of this viral shedding process that you referred to.
Yeah, right. I know we have to worry about being near people who had the vaccine. Yeah, spike protein shedding. That's a really interesting concept, and whether it's true or not, we don't know, and we need research. But it's certainly provocative. And of course, organic diet, sunlight. We mentioned that earlier. That those are so crucial. And I think a high sulfur diet. Sulfur is very important for the immune system.
Yes, absolutely. So, wow, here's the other thing that you put in there, that it was a bit at the end that was, and by the way, so there's an art. It's this whole production commercialization of this vaccine is a process. So ideally, they've got this highly genetically modified messenger RNA that's encased in this nanoliposome of PEG, is what they're intending to do. But the unintended consequences of the commercialization of this product is that some spike proteins, fragmented spike proteins, don't make it into that nanoliposome. They're actually circulating in the diluent or the liquid that it's encased in. So why don't you go into that and tell us about potential complications of that fragmented protein being injected?
Well, I was really shocked when I heard Greg figured this out. He read it that they the version of the protein of the virus of the vaccine that they used in the trials was carefully constructed with this expensive technology that it makes the DNA in a way that doesn't involve any kind of cells. And so and they made a much more reliable version of pure DNA, pure RNA without any contaminants. But then once they had to mass produce it, apparently they used a different method to make the DNA, and it involves growing bacteria in culture, I believe, is what they said. And then they give these bacteria, they modify their genome to have this spike protein in it, and then they have this way of teaching them to make lots of it, because they can sort of activate that gene and have these microbes make lots and lots of spike protein, and make lots and lots of spike DNA. They're trying to get the DNA by proliferating the microbes. And so then they have to isolate the DNA from a much messier situation. And then they get much less reliable versions of the DNA, and then they get much less reliable versions of the RNA. And the RNA has many more fragmented versions, and even possibly some double-stranded RNA. So there's just like a much messier consequence of the version that was used in production compared to the version that was done in the laboratory for the trial experiments. This is what Greg Nye found something that talked about that. And if that's true, I mean, that's really shocking too, because they never actually did the trials on the same substances that they're putting together in the vaccine. So, and if you get this RNA that's only partially coded, then what happens? You make all these partial strings of short chains of parts of the prion. I mean
Protein.
the prion protein. It is a prion protein, but I mean the spike protein. So you have all these different short chains of spike proteins in there, and the claim is that those don't matter, but
of course,
who knows? Who knows?
Never tested it, but it's safe.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling how many different things we don't understand about these vaccines and what they can do. And there's also the herpes. I don't know if you remember the herpes simplex.
Yeah, it's an increased incidence of herpes. Yes.
Yeah, so people are getting shingles after the vaccine, and that's a sign that you've weakened the innate immune system. So I think it's an overproduction of TNF alpha that actually interferes with interferon alpha, which is what you need to keep the herpes in check. So when you get the vaccine, it takes away your ability to keep herpes in check, which is a sign that your innate immune system is weakened. And of course, I've seen that with the flu vaccine. There's a study that showed that people who got, this was a controlled study where the people who got the flu vaccine had a 4-fold increased risk of syncytial virus over the next year. 4-fold, because their innate immune system was weakened. And I believe every time you get any vaccine, you're basically driving your immune system towards the adaptive immune system. It's all about making antibodies. And the immune cells actually become less capable of the generic immunity that you need to fight off everything else. So if that's true, that means that people who have been vaccinated are going to be less resistant to the strains that are coming out that have mutated their way out of a jam. So the ones that are not sensitive to the specific antibodies that have been perfected against that one version of the spike protein, those guys are going to have a field day on the people who have been vaccinated, because they're not going to be as capable of fighting off those mutant strains as the ones who have not been vaccinated. I'm predicting that.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back as we summarize things. We said initially that this is classified as an unprecedented vaccine. And those typically require 12 to 15 years before they go into commercial production to prove the safety. This vaccine was produced in less than 1 year. So the studies haven't been done. We have no idea, no concept, no clue. The paper you wrote is really probably the finest one to date on summarizing the theoretical likelihood of adverse outcomes. And it's this likelihood because the studies we're compiling the data, and the initial data, we've only been in this 6 months, folks, that does not look good. Most of the countries who've had the vaccine, the death rate went up immediately. It spiked. You can see it's going down, and we'll have a link to the video that shows this in hundreds of different, dozens, if not 100 different countries where it's introduced and it goes up. So but the studies, they did some studies, obviously, a few months, or trials, I'm sure classified human trials, phase 2 and 3. And in those trials, we didn't discuss this, but I wanted to mention it now because I forgot it, in that they conflated, we projected that unprecedented vaccine success rate should be about 2% or so. But we have a 93 to 95% success rate or effectiveness rate in these early trials from Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. So what is that, though? It is a conflation or confusion between absolute risk and relative risk. So the relative risk is a 93, 95% reduction, not in likelihood of catching the disease, not in having herd immunity, but in having decreased symptoms. Decreased symptoms is the only thing it showed. Mm-hmm. But that was still a relative risk. If you look at the absolute risk, it was only 1%.
Right.
1%, which is crazy. So we're doing this vaccine with virtually no benefits, no downside. No one is looking. And the second paper you sent, which we're going to have a link to from the American Frontline Physicians, talked about this. It's the risk to reward ratio. Mm-hmm. Enormous risk, unbelievable risk, increased risk of death is prion disease, neurodegenerative diseases, complications, miscarriages, and virtually no benefit. It doesn't pan out unless one thing, you are a stockholder or the owner directly of the vaccine companies, or Bill Gates, who's invested heavily in it. That's the only way this thing makes sense. The only way.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it? I just, I still feel like I'm in a surreal time. I just can't quite understand that this is actually taking place. It doesn't make sense to me.
This is a dystopian novel on steroids.
Exactly. It's sort of mass hysteria. Mass hysteria, right? They've managed to convince people that this disease is so fearful that whatever you can do to stop it, you have to do it. And you have to do it for the good of your country. You know, they're telling you, if you don't even think you need the vaccine, never mind, get it anyway for everybody else, right? There's just so much pressure.
And it gets more egregious as the time goes on. So just a few weeks ago, even though pregnant women were in any of these fake studies, and even in these fake studies, you probably know, but I forgot to mention, that they got rid of the control group. They said, oh, this vaccine is too good. We can't have a control group. It would be unethical to do that. So they eliminated the potential for ever finding out any differences between the two groups. But then 3 weeks ago, the CDC said pregnant women should be vaccinated. And we know 30% increase in miscarriages.
That is so incredible. I remember even when they first released it, they said, well, if you're pregnant, you know, we haven't studied on anybody who's pregnant, but if you want to get it, that's not a problem. Go ahead, get the vaccine. Now, I'm like, are you kidding me? They haven't even studied on anybody who's pregnant. You're telling me to get it? I don't understand. I don't understand how people can listen to this kind of advice.
Well, it's primarily through the propaganda, but it is reprehensible malpractice, and the individuals responsible for that, implementing that recommendation, should be jailed and have their license permanently removed.
I agree.
It's in violation of the Nuremberg Code. Absolutely it is. Yeah, there's no question. It's illegal, and they're getting away with it. But even on the same level, Fauci just said last week that the goal is by the end of the year to have this for everyone down to 6 months.
I know, it's scaring me. They keep on bringing down the age. Now it's 12 years old.
And these kids have virtually no risk of having any complications.
So insane. I just can't fathom how we got to where we are today. I just can't understand.
Yeah, it is. And the majority of the people will think that we're nuts and that we're conspiracy theorists. But we're not. We're telling people the facts, and we will be vindicated. There is not a micro doubt in my mind. The truth will eventually surface when, unfortunately, millions of people have to die before. You know, this is another interesting fact. Just to summarize this thing, is that swine flu vaccine, you were around certainly when that happened in the late 70s. There was no liability insurance. That didn't happen until 1986. So in the late 70s, they had it. The government provided the liability, and they recommended everyone to get it. They gave it to 48 million people. 48 million. Of those, 53 people died. 53. And they shut the program down. Lots of people got Guillain-Barré. They paid out $3.5 billion worth in damages. They shut it down with 53 deaths. Today, as we're speaking, mid-May, we have over 4,000 reported deaths to the VAERS database. And it's known that the VAERS database is only showing between 1% and 10%. So that 4,000 could be 40 to 400,000 deaths.
I know. It's just amazing.
And it's still not shut down. In fact, it's the exact opposite. We want everyone, pregnant women, 6-month-old kids, to have this vaccine.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, it's just mind-bogglingly unbelievable. I don't understand, what's going on inside people's heads, I guess, other than making a lot of money and technology. I mean, they think if they can get us to accept this vaccine, there's all kinds of other mRNA technology products that they've got in the wings. They're so excited about the potential.
Vaccines, they're a very clever way to earn revenue because there is, as we mentioned, no liability. There's no way they can ever get a bill from a lawyer for a damages done from this vaccine. They're permanently immune to prosecution. Permanently, no liability.
That's just incredible.
So it's like the perfect drug. I mean, any drug they make, there's potential to harm and damages that frequently results in billions of dollars of lawsuits.
I know.
Damages and awards. So anyway, it's, we can go on and on about this, but I want to summarize with some hope that your body was born with a powerful tool to eliminate this and protect you. And it's called your innate immune system. So even if you've gotten a vaccine, you want to upregulate as much as possible because we don't know. The studies haven't been done. We won't know for years, if ever. So you want to do things like optimize your vitamin D, 60 to 80 nanograms per milliliter in the US, 100 to 150 nanomoles per liter outside the US. And the only way you know is to test it. You can't guess. You've got to test. You get it for free if you go outside your bathing suit in close to solar noon. That'll work almost everywhere in the summer. So do that, or swallow vitamin D, 8,000 units a day. Do time-restricted eating. And then do sauna regularly. It is crazy not to do sauna, especially now that we know there's toxicities from these spike proteins, and you want to upregulate the heat shock proteins and have your body remove them from your body. And there's no studies on this. Obviously, it's too darn new, but there's every bit of reasonable common sense to suggest that this will help mitigate that. So even if you haven't gotten the vaccine, you're exposed to people who have, because it's a crazy, I don't know what the numbers, I think it's 2/3 of the people over 60. In some counties, it's like almost 100%. I mean, they've manipulated and brainwashed and propagandized people to the hilt. They've convinced them that they need this not worthless. It's worse than worthless, because it's going to kill so many people. So anyway, so you're going to be exposed to these spike proteins, not the virus, but the spike proteins for those who've been vaccinated, because they're shedding these exosomes. Very, very clear. So, but don't be confused. It's not shedding the virus. There's a distinction there, an important distinction. So anything you want to add to that summary? Because well, first of all, before I offer you the chance to finalize your comments, is just extreme gratitude, appreciation, not for myself, but every one of us, for taking the hard work, 6 months of diligent hard work to research it. So I know what it's like to go through those studies. It is a pain, but it's kind of fun because it's kind of like a treasure hunt. But for doing that and providing us with this massive, incredibly important piece of information.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It certainly was a labor of love, because I'm just like so concerned about my children, my grandchildren. You know, everyone's being pressured to get it, and families are being, tortured by different people having different opinions about the vaccine and fighting with each other. I mean, it's just caused a tremendous amount of stress among so many people across the globe. And I really hope that, I hate to say this, that it needs to get bad, in order to get better, because it takes a huge amount before they finally recognize that it's not working. And I don't know at what point they will, but that's what needs to happen. We need to recognize that it's not a good idea, and then we need to stop it. And we need to do that immediately, in my opinion, but we'll see what happens. Okay.
Well, thanks again. And hopefully we'll have you back really soon with Judy Mikovits.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That three-way conversation will be really intriguing. So I'm really looking forward to it. Hope she can join us soon. So that would be great.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.